In the heart of Lagos, a city bustling with opportunity and ambition, Wale had once stood tall. His name was synonymous with success, a man who had climbed the ranks of the business world with charisma and determination. Wale and his wife, Linda, enjoyed the fruits of his labor, living a life of luxury and comfort. Their home was a beacon of modern elegance, filled with the finest things money could buy: expensive cars in the driveway, designer clothes in the closet, and a social calendar brimming with exclusive events. But, dear viewers of Innocent Stories, what happens when the pursuit of wealth leads to a dangerous game? Stay tuned to find out. As the saying goes, the higher you climb, the harder you fall. Wale was not content with the steady progress of his legitimate business ventures. He wanted more, and the allure of quick, vast profits drew him into the shadowy underbelly of the city's business world. He started making deals with men who operated outside the law, thinking he could outsmart them and double his wealth without consequence. For a while, it seemed like he was right. The money flowed in like a river, and Wale's confidence grew. He expanded his lifestyle even further, investing in risky ventures and indulging in the extravagant nightlife of the city. He became a regular at high-stakes poker games, where fortunes were won and lost in the blink of an eye. Wale felt untouchable, a king among men. But, Innocent Stories viewers, can a king remain untouchable when his empire is built on lies? Keep watching to uncover the shocking truth. The golden days didn't last. As swiftly as the money had come, it began to slip through his fingers. A deal went wrong, and then another, and soon Wale found himself on the wrong side of a powerful network of criminals. The debts piled up faster than he could count, and the once flowing cash was replaced by threats and demands from dangerous people. At home, the tension grew unbearable. Linda noticed the changes immediately: the late nights, the missed payments, the constant worry etched on Wale's face. Their arguments became more frequent and intense, as Wale's pride refused to let him admit the full extent of their financial troubles. Linda, who had stood by his side through thick and thin, felt her love turning into a heavy burden. The home that was once their sanctuary now echoed with angry words and cold silences. Wale, desperate to reclaim his lost fortune, continued to chase after risky deals, but with every failed attempt, he sank deeper into the quicksand of debt. The luxurious life they had built began to crumble around them, and the reality of their situation hit harder with each passing day. The electricity was cut off twice in a month, and creditors started calling, their polite reminders turning into stern warnings. The weight of it all was crushing, and Wale's once unshakable confidence turned into a bitter desperation. He couldn't bear to face the man he had become, and every glance at Linda reminded him of how far they had fallen. Yet, in his pride, he continued to reject her suggestions to downsize and live within their means, clinging to the illusion that he could still turn things around. Linda, though heartbroken, remained supportive, trying to find ways to keep their lives together, but the constant stress and financial strain were too much. The love they had shared, once vibrant and full of life, now seemed like a distant memory. The arguments became daily occurrences, and the future, once so bright, was now shrouded in uncertainty. One evening, as Wale sat in their dimly lit living room, staring blankly at a stack of unpaid bills, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from an old business acquaintance, inviting him and Linda to a party. The event was to be held at one of the most exclusive venues in the city, a rooftop bar that offered stunning views of Lagos's glittering skyline. The invitation was a reminder of the life they used to live, a life filled with glamour and excitement. For a moment, the thought of returning to that world, even for just one night, lifted Wale's spirits. Wale showed Linda the invitation, his eyes filled with a rare glimmer of hope. He suggested that they attend, arguing that it could be a chance to reconnect with old friends and maybe even find a new opportunity to help them out of their financial mess. Linda, though hesitant at first, agreed. She too missed the days when they were a power couple, admired by all. On the night of the party, they dressed in their best, though their clothes, once symbols of wealth, now seemed like relics of a bygone era. Linda chose a simple yet elegant dress, one that she had worn during happier times. Wale, too, put on an old tailored suit that still carried the scent of expensive cologne, a faint reminder of the man he used to be. As they arrived at the venue, the sight of the luxurious setting brought a mix of emotions. The rooftop bar was stunning, with twinkling lights and a panoramic view of the city below. Guests mingled, their laughter and conversations blending with the soft music that played in the background. It was a world they had once belonged to, and yet now felt foreign, almost out of reach. Wale and Linda made their way through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries with familiar faces. Some of the guests greeted them warmly, but others offered awkward smiles, their eyes betraying a hint of pity. It was clear that word had spread about Wale's fall from grace, and while no one said anything outright, the tension was palpable. For a while, Wale managed to forget his troubles, laughing and reminiscing with old friends. Linda, too, tried to enjoy herself, but the weight of their situation hung heavy on her heart. As the night wore on, the noise in the crowd became overwhelming, and she felt the need to escape, if only for a moment. Linda stepped out onto the terrace, where the cool night air greeted her like an old friend. She walked over to the edge, resting her hands on the railing as she gazed out at the city. The lights of Lagos stretched out before her, a dazzling display of life and energy, yet instead of feeling uplifted, Linda felt a deep sense of loss. As she stood there, lost in her thoughts, she became aware of someone approaching. A tall, well-dressed man with an air of confidence stopped beside her, his gaze fixed on the skyline. Without turning to face her, he commented on the beauty of the view, his voice smooth and deep. Linda glanced at him out of the corner of her eye, recognizing him instantly. This was Albert, the billionaire. His name was well known in the city, often spoken with a mix of admiration and envy. Albert was a man of immense wealth and influence, someone who had the power to change lives with a single decision. His presence was commanding, and there was a subtle charm in the way he carried himself. Albert's attention shifted from the view to Linda. He noted how she seemed out of place, her beauty and grace standing in stark contrast to the noise and chaos of the party inside. He spoke of life's challenges, hinting at how they often lead to unexpected opportunities. His words were carefully chosen, laced with implications that Linda couldn't ignore. For a moment, Linda felt herself drawn to Albert's charm, the way he seemed to understand the burdens she carried. There was something alluring about his confidence, his ability to see through the facades that others put up. But beneath the surface, Linda sensed danger, a danger that could pull her into a world she wasn't prepared for. The conversation lingered in Linda's mind as she returned to the party, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled in her chest. But as much as she tried, she couldn't forget the way Albert had looked at her, as if he saw something in her that no one else did. Inside the party, Wale was deep in conversation with a group of his old business friends, trying to recapture the feeling of success that had once defined him. But when he saw Linda return from the terrace, a strange expression on her face, he excused himself and walked over to her. The change in her demeanor didn't go unnoticed. Wale could see the unease in her eyes, the way she seemed distant, preoccupied. He asked her what was wrong, his voice tinged with concern. Linda hesitated, unsure of whether to share what had happened on the terrace, but the weight of it was too much to keep to herself. She told him about her encounter with Albert, the way he had approached her, and the conversation that followed. As Wale listened, his concern quickly turned to anger. The mention of Albert, the billionaire with a reputation for getting what he wanted, set off alarms in his mind. Wale's thoughts raced. He had heard stories about Albert, how he used his wealth and influence to manipulate people, especially women. The idea that this man had shown interest in Linda made his blood boil. But more than that, it touched on his deepest fears. Wale was no longer the man he used to be, and the thought of losing Linda to a man like Albert made Wale feel even more powerless. Anger seethed within him, not just at Albert, but also at himself for the situation they were in. How had it come to this? Just a few years ago, he had everything: money, respect, and a happy marriage. Now, he was struggling to keep his head above water, and his wife was being approached by billionaires who could give her everything he no longer could. Wale's pride wouldn't let him show weakness. He stormed out of the party room and headed straight for the terrace, determined to confront Albert. The cool night air did nothing to calm his fury as he marched toward the man who had dared to speak to his wife. Albert was still there, leaning casually against the railing, looking out at the city. When he saw Wale approaching, he turned and smiled, but Wale wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. Without hesitation, he demanded to know what Albert wanted with Linda. Albert remained calm, his smile never wavering. He acknowledged that Linda had caught his eye, complimenting her beauty and grace, but he didn't apologize for it. Instead, he spoke of how life could change in unexpected ways and how sometimes those changes led to opportunities that were too good to pass up. Wale's anger was mixed with confusion. What was Albert really after? Did he think he could just walk in and take whatever he wanted, including another man's wife? But then, Albert said something that made Wale pause. Albert casually mentioned his wealth, his ability to make problems disappear with a wave of his hand. He hinted that he could help Wale out of his financial troubles, that money wasn't an issue for him. All he wanted in return was a chance to spend time with Linda, no strings attached. Wale felt his anger waver, replaced by a different emotion, temptation. The debts, the constant pressure, the fear of losing everything, could all of that really be solved so easily? He hated himself for even considering it, but the idea of having his old life back, of not having to worry about money anymore, was too powerful to ignore. In that moment of weakness, Wale made a decision that would change everything. He told Albert that Linda wasn't his wife, but his sister. The lie came out of his mouth before he could stop it, but once it was said, there was no taking it back. Albert's smile widened, and he offered Wale a generous sum of money right then and there, along with his phone number. He said he would like to spend one night with Linda and that Wale should speak to her about it. Wale took the money, his hands shaking as he shoved it into his pocket. The deed was done, and as he walked back inside to find Linda, his mind was a storm of guilt, shame, and desperation. How was he going to convince her to go along with this? What had he just agreed to? When he found Linda, she was talking with a few acquaintances, but the moment she saw him, she knew something was wrong. He pulled her aside, struggling to keep his voice steady as he lied to her. He told her that he had confronted Albert, that he had stood up to him, and that Albert had backed down, respecting their marriage. Linda felt a surge of pride and relief. For a moment, she saw the man she had fallen in love with, the strong and confident Wale who would protect her no matter what. She hugged him tightly, grateful that he had defended her. But Wale couldn't look her in the eyes. The guilt was already eating away at him, but he kept the truth hidden, telling himself that he was doing this for them, to save their marriage and their lives. When they returned home that night, the lie hung between them like a dark cloud. The days that followed were filled with tension and unease. Wale could hardly sleep, the weight of what he had done pressing down on him. He knew he had to tell Linda the truth, but he feared how she would react. He needed her to understand that he had done it out of desperation, out of a need to save them from the financial ruin that was closing in on them. Finally, one evening, when they were alone in the living room, Wale couldn't hold it in any longer. He sat Linda down and confessed everything, the lie about her being his sister, the money Albert had given him, and Albert's request for a night with her. Linda stared at him in disbelief, her mind struggling to grasp what she was hearing. The man she had loved and trusted, the man she had stood by through thick and thin, had sold her out for money. It was too much to process, too much to forgive. Wale pleaded with her, his voice breaking as he explained how desperate he was, how they were on the brink of losing everything. He begged her to consider Albert's offer, to think about the money they needed so badly. He tried to justify his actions, saying that it was just one night, that it didn't have to mean anything. But Linda was horrified. The thought of being with another man, especially under these circumstances, was unthinkable. She couldn't believe that Wale would even suggest such a thing. It was a betrayal on a level she never thought possible, and the pain of it cut deep. She refused, of course. She couldn't understand how Wale could even think she would agree to something so degrading. But Wale, driven by desperation and fear, wouldn't let it go. He continued to press her, reminding her of their debts, of the danger they were in if they didn't pay off what they owed. He told her that this was the only way out, the only chance they had to save themselves. Linda's world was crumbling around her. She didn't recognize the man in front of her, this desperate, pleading version of Wale who was willing to sacrifice everything, even their marriage, for money. But as the days went on, and Wale continued to push, something in her began to crack. She started to see the situation through his eyes, the mounting debts, the threats from creditors, the fear of losing everything they had worked for. Wale's words began to wear her down, and the hopelessness of their situation started to sink in. Finally, after days of constant pressure, Linda gave in. She couldn't bear the thought of living in poverty, of losing their home, of having everything they had built together torn away. With a heavy heart, she agreed to go along with Wale's plan. Wale was relieved, but the victory felt hollow. He knew he had pushed her into something she didn't want, something that would forever change the way she looked at him. But in his desperation, he convinced himself that this was the right thing to do, that they would get through it together and come out the other side stronger. He told Linda to pretend that she was his sister when she met Albert, to play along with the lie that had started this whole mess. Linda was shocked, but she had no choice. She felt trapped, caught between a husband who had betrayed her and a life that was falling apart. As the day approached for Linda to meet Albert, the tension in their home became unbearable. Wale tried to reassure her, telling her that it would be over quickly, that it didn't have to mean anything. But the more he spoke, the more Linda felt like she was being pushed into a corner, forced into something she couldn't escape. The night arrived, and with a heavy heart, Linda prepared to meet Albert. She dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that was elegant but understated, not wanting to draw too much attention to herself. Wale drove her to the hotel where she was to meet Albert. The ride was silent, the tension between them thick and suffocating. Wale's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. He tried to tell himself that this was for the best, that it was just one night, that it didn't have to mean anything. But as they pulled up to the hotel, the reality of what he was asking hit him like a punch to the gut. He had done this. He had put Linda in this position, and now there was no turning back. Linda got out of the car, her legs trembling as she walked toward the entrance. She felt numb, disconnected from herself, as if she were watching someone else go through the motions. The hotel lobby was grand, with marble floors and chandeliers that sparkled in the dim light, but to Linda, it felt cold and empty, a place of shadows and secrets. Albert was waiting for her in the hotel bar. He greeted her with a warm smile, as if they were old friends meeting for a drink. Linda forced herself to smile back, to play the role that Wale had asked of her. She felt like she was in a nightmare, one where she couldn't wake up, no matter how hard she tried. They made small talk, Albert charming as ever, but Linda could barely focus on the words. All she could think about was what was to come, the choice she had made, and the man she had once loved who had led her to this moment. When Albert finally suggested they go up to his suite, Linda's heart pounded in her chest. She followed him, her steps heavy, her mind screaming at her to run, to get away, but she didn't. She couldn't. As the elevator doors closed, sealing her fate, Linda felt a tear slip down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly before Albert could see. She felt trapped, caught in a situation she never imagined she'd be in. The elevator ride felt like an eternity, and when the doors finally opened to reveal Albert's luxurious suite, it was as if she had stepped into another world, a world where she didn't belong. Albert was a perfect gentleman, offering her a drink and making small talk, as if this were just a regular date. But Linda could barely hear him, her mind racing with a mix of fear, guilt, and despair. She knew what was expected of her, and though she had agreed to this, every part of her wanted to escape. Albert approached her, his charm still evident, but there was something in his eyes, a hunger that made Linda's skin crawl. She felt sick, but she forced herself to stay calm, reminding herself of the money, of the debts, of the promises Wale had made. As the night went on, Linda tried to distance herself mentally, to pretend this wasn't happening, that she was somewhere else, someone else. But no matter how hard she tried, the reality was inescapable. Albert was kind, even gentle, but that didn't make it any easier. Every touch, every word felt like a betrayal, not just of Wale, but of herself. When it was over, Albert, satisfied, handed her an envelope filled with cash, thanking her as if they had just concluded a business deal. Linda took the money, her hands trembling, and left the suite as quickly as she could, her mind a blur of emotions. The ride back home was silent, the weight of what had happened hanging in the air like a dark cloud. When she walked through the door of their home, Wale was waiting, his face tense with worry. He asked how it went, his voice shaky, but Linda couldn't bring herself to speak. She handed him the envelope and went straight to their bedroom, closing the door behind her. Wale stared at the money in his hands, a mix of relief and guilt washing over him. They had the money they needed to keep the creditors at bay, to keep their home, to avoid the ruin that had been looming over them. But at what cost? He had betrayed the woman he loved, pushed her into something she didn't want, and now he was holding the evidence of that betrayal. Linda lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The pain of what she had done, what Wale had asked her to do, was too much to bear. She felt like a stranger in her own skin, disconnected from the life she once knew. The love she had for Wale had been twisted into something unrecognizable, tainted by the choices they had made. The days that followed were tense and awkward. Linda and Wale barely spoke, each lost in their own thoughts. The money had solved their immediate problems, but it had created a rift between them that seemed impossible to bridge. Wale tried to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay, but Linda couldn't bring herself to believe him. Despite the pain and guilt, Wale and Linda tried to move on. They paid off their debts, and for a while, it seemed like things might get better. But the damage had been done, and it wasn't long before Wale's desperation resurfaced. The money from Albert had given them temporary relief, but their financial problems were far from over. Wale, seeing no other way out, began to suggest that Linda meet Albert again. At first, Linda refused outright, horrified that Wale would even ask. But as their money troubles grew worse and Wale's pleas became more desperate, she found herself once again trapped. Wale convinced himself that this was the only way. He told Linda that they needed more money, that Albert was willing to pay handsomely for her time, and that this could be their chance to finally get ahead. Linda, feeling more hopeless than ever, eventually gave in, agreeing to see Albert once more. The second time was even harder than the first. Linda felt like she was losing pieces of herself with each visit, her spirit slowly being chipped away. Albert, ever the gentleman, continued to shower her with money and gifts, but Linda felt nothing but emptiness. She was doing this for Wale, for their future, but the cost was too high. Wale, blinded by his desire to fix their problems, couldn't see the toll it was taking on Linda. He convinced himself that it was just temporary, that once they had enough money, they could stop, and things would go back to normal. But deep down, he knew that things would never be the same. As the visits to Albert continued, something unexpected happened. Albert, who had started this arrangement purely out of desire, began to develop genuine feelings for Linda. He admired her strength, her beauty, and the way she carried herself despite the difficult situation. He started to look forward to their meetings, not just for the physical connection, but for the time they spent together. Linda noticed the change in Albert, and while she tried to keep her distance emotionally, she couldn't help but feel a connection forming. Albert treated her with kindness and respect, qualities that she hadn't felt from Wale in a long time. Slowly, Linda's feelings toward Albert began to change. One day, during one of their meetings, Albert confessed that he had fallen in love with her. He told Linda that he admired her and that he wanted to be more than just a transaction in her life. He wanted to take care of her, to give her the life she deserved. Linda was shocked. She had never imagined that Albert, a man she had viewed as nothing more than a means to an end, could develop such feelings for her. But as she looked into his eyes, she realized that she had started to feel something too. The kindness he showed her, the way he listened to her, and the comfort he provided were things she hadn't experienced in her marriage for a long time. For the first time, Linda questioned what she really wanted. She had agreed to this arrangement for Wale, but now she was torn between her duty to her husband and the feelings she had started to develop for Albert. Wale, completely unaware of the emotional bond forming between Linda and Albert, continued to push her to meet him. He saw only the money, the solution to their problems, not realizing that each visit was driving a deeper wedge between them. As the days went on, Linda found herself dreading the time she spent with Wale and looking forward to her meetings with Albert. She was confused, torn between the life she had known and the life she could have. The love she once had for Wale had turned into something bitter, poisoned by the choices they had made. Wale, still blind to what was happening, believed that once they had enough money, everything would be okay. But Linda knew that things were far from okay. She was losing herself, and with each visit to Albert, she felt herself slipping further away from the woman she used to be. Linda's feelings for Albert continued to grow, and it became harder for her to deny the truth. She was falling in love with him. Albert treated her with a kindness and respect that she hadn't felt in years, and she found herself drawn to him in ways she never expected. One day, during one of their meetings, Albert took Linda's hand and told her that he wanted more than just a night here and there. He wanted to be with her, to give her the life she deserved, free from the stress and pain that her marriage had become. He offered her a way out, a chance to leave Wale and start a new life with him. Linda was torn. The idea of leaving Wale felt wrong, like a betrayal of the vows she had taken, but at the same time, she couldn't ignore the way Albert made her feel. For the first time in a long time, she felt valued, loved, and cared for. Albert promised her a life of comfort, free from the financial worries that had plagued her marriage, but more importantly, he promised her happiness. Linda didn't know what to do. She had stayed with Wale through thick and thin, supporting him even when things got tough. But the man she had once loved had changed. He had pushed her into a situation that had broken her spirit, and now she didn't know if she could ever forgive him for it. As Linda considered Albert's offer, she found herself thinking more and more about what she wanted for her future. Did she want to continue living in a marriage that had become nothing but pain and guilt, or did she want to take a chance on happiness, even if it meant leaving everything she had known behind? The decision weighed heavily on her, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she couldn't go on living the way she had been. Something had to change, and she was the only one who could make that change. One evening, after another tense day at home with Wale, Linda made up her mind. She couldn't live like this anymore. She needed to be free, to find happiness again, even if it meant making the hardest decision of her life. She went to see Albert and told him everything, her fears, her doubts, and her decision. Albert listened patiently, holding her hand as she poured out her heart. When she was done, he looked into her eyes and told her that he would be there for her, no matter what she chose. Wale, still blind to what was really happening, believed that things were finally getting better. They had money again, and he thought their troubles were behind them. But he started to notice a change in Linda. She was distant, cold even, and no matter how much he tried to reconnect with her, she seemed to pull further away. Then, one day, Wale found out the truth. He came across messages on Linda's phone from Albert, messages that made it clear they were more than just acquaintances. His heart sank as the realization hit him: Linda had fallen in love with Albert. Wale was furious. His anger boiled over, fueled by the betrayal and the thought of losing Linda to another man. He confronted her that night, demanding to know the truth. Linda, no longer willing to lie, admitted everything. She told him that she had fallen out of love with him and that Albert was the one who made her feel alive again. Wale was devastated. The woman he had once loved more than anything had chosen another man. He begged her to stay, promising that he would change, that he would make things right, but Linda's heart had already moved on, and his pleas fell on deaf ears. Desperate and humiliated, Wale decided to take matters into his own hands. He went to see Albert, determined to confront him and take back what he believed was his. Wale was angry and reckless, and when he finally stood face to face with Albert, he didn't hold back. He threatened Albert, telling him to stay away from Linda or face the consequences. But Albert was unfazed. He looked at Wale with cold, calculating eyes and warned him to back off. Albert made it clear that he wasn't afraid of Wale's threats and that if Wale tried anything, he would make sure Wale was forgotten, a chilling promise that sent a shiver down Wale's spine. Wale realized that Albert was far more powerful than he had imagined. This wasn't just about Linda anymore, it was about survival. Wale left Albert's office, shaken and defeated, knowing that he had lost not just his wife, but his dignity as well. Wale couldn't bear the thought of losing Linda to Albert. The fear of being alone, of watching the woman he loved live happily with another man, consumed him. Wale was desperate, and in his desperation, he made a choice that would drag him even deeper into darkness. One night, Wale met up with some old acquaintances, men who had strayed far from the path of honesty. These were dangerous men, known for their involvement in armed robbery. They raided banks, wealthy homes, and other places where money could be taken by force. Wale knew it was a risk, but he didn't care. He needed money, lots of it, to keep Linda by his side. Wale joined their gang, becoming part of their heists. At first, the fear of getting caught made his heart race, but as time went on, the fear faded, replaced by a sense of grim determination. Wale wasn't doing this for himself, he was doing it for Linda. Every time they hit a bank or a rich man's mansion, Wale took his share of the loot, tucking away large sums of money. After each robbery, Wale would bring the money home and give it all to Linda, hoping that the wealth would make her stay. He thought that if he could provide her with everything she wanted, she wouldn't need Albert. But Linda was no fool. She knew something wasn't right. The money Wale brought home wasn't from any honest job, and she refused to take it. Linda confronted Wale, asking him where the money was coming from. Wale avoided her questions, telling her not to worry about it and that he was just trying to make things better for them. But Linda wasn't convinced. She could see the darkness growing in Wale's eyes, the anger and desperation that seemed to be eating away at him. Linda refused the money, pushing it back into Wale's hands. She told him she didn't want anything to do with it, that she didn't need his stolen wealth. This rejection hit Wale hard. He couldn't understand why Linda was pushing him away when he was trying so hard to make her happy. The more she refused him, the angrier he became. Wale's anger grew each day, fueled by his frustration and fear. He started drinking more, losing himself in the bottle to numb the pain of rejection. The man Linda had once loved was now a shadow, consumed by bitterness and rage. He couldn't see that his actions were only driving her further away. One night, after another failed attempt to win Linda over with his stolen money, Wale snapped. He was drunk, stumbling around the house, yelling at Linda for not appreciating what he was doing for her. Linda tried to calm him down, but Wale was too far gone. In a fit of rage, he grabbed her by the arm and threatened her. Wale told Linda that if she ever tried to leave him for Albert, he would kill her. His voice was cold, filled with a menace that Linda had never heard before. For the first time, Linda saw just how dangerous Wale had become. This wasn't the man she had married, this was someone else, someone who had lost himself to anger and fear. Linda was terrified. She knew that Wale meant every word he said, and the thought of what he might do if she tried to leave him made her blood run cold. She realized that things had gone too far, that she was trapped in a situation that was spiraling out of control. Wale, still holding her tightly, stared at her with wild eyes. He didn't want to hurt her, but he couldn't control the rage that had taken over his heart. The thought of losing her to Albert was unbearable, and in his twisted mind, he believed that threatening her was the only way to keep her by his side. Linda's fear turned into resolve. She knew she had to get out of this situation, but she had to be smart about it. If she tried to leave now, Wale might make good on his threat. She needed to find a way to escape, to protect herself from the man who had become her worst nightmare. In the days that followed, Linda pretended to go along with Wale's demands, acting as if she had accepted her fate. But inside, she was planning her escape, thinking of how she could get away from Wale and find safety. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but staying with him was no longer an option. Wale, blinded by his obsession, didn't see the change in Linda's behavior. He thought his threats had worked, that she was finally his again. But the truth was, Linda was already gone. Her heart, her mind, and her spirit had left him long before she would ever walk out the door. As Wale continued his dangerous life of crime, Linda quietly prepared for the day she would leave, knowing that when she did, it would have to be for good. She couldn't live in fear any longer, and she couldn't allow herself to be trapped by a man who had become a stranger. One day, when Wale was out, Linda quietly packed her belongings. She didn't take much, just what she needed to start fresh. She left behind the memories of her life with Wale, the pain, and fear, and walked out the door without looking back. Linda knew it was risky, but she had to do it. Staying meant living in constant fear, and she was done with that. When Wale came home later that evening, he immediately knew something was wrong. The house felt empty, too quiet. He called out for Linda, but there was no answer. Panic set in as he searched the house, room by room, hoping she was just out for a walk or visiting a friend. But when he found her closet empty and her belongings gone, the truth hit him like a punch to the gut: Linda had left him. Wale's anger erupted. He grabbed his phone and called Linda, his hand shaking with fury, but she didn't answer. He called again and again, each time going straight to voicemail. In a fit of rage, Wale tried to call Albert, certain that Linda had run to him. But when he dialed Albert's number, he was EF=NoFollow was met with a cold, automated message: "This number is no longer in service." Albert had blocked him. Desperate and seething with anger, Wale drove to Albert's estate, determined to confront him and get Linda back. But when he arrived at the gate, the security guards stopped him. They wouldn't let him in, no matter how much he yelled and threatened. Wale was powerless, standing outside the gates of a life that was now closed off to him. Wale drove home, his mind racing with anger and despair. He had lost everything: his wife, his dignity, and now his control. He was spiraling out of control, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. But things were about to get even worse. That night, as Wale sat in his empty house, drowning his sorrows in alcohol, there was a knock at the door. When he opened it, he was met by a group of policemen. They were there to arrest him. Wale's heart sank as they handcuffed him and told him the charges. His gang had been caught during a robbery, and they had confessed everything, including Wale's role as their leader. The police took Wale away, and as he sat in the back of the patrol car, the reality of his situation finally hit him. His life was over. The choices he had made, the paths he had taken, had led him to this moment. He was alone, defeated, and heading to prison for a long time. Linda heard the news of Wale's arrest and felt a wave of relief. She knew it was over. The nightmare that had been her life with Wale was finally behind her. She was safe now, free to live the life she had always wanted. 2 months later, Linda married Albert in a lavish wedding. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with happiness and hope for the future. Linda wore a stunning white dress, and as she walked down the aisle, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Albert was waiting for her at the altar, his eyes filled with love and admiration. They exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other for the rest of their lives. The wedding was the start of a new chapter for Linda, a chapter filled with love, respect, and happiness. She had finally found the life she deserved, far from the pain and fear that had once consumed her. Dear viewers of Innocent Stories, what lessons did you take away from this dramatic tale? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story from Innocent Stories, give us a thumbs up, share it with friends, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Thanks for watching, and stay blessed.